welcome back. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chris. I'm a tattoo artist and fine artist living in Johannesburg, South Africa. Today we're going to be talking about something that you guys actually requested. Thank you once again to everyone who voted on the poll on my Instagram stories to decide what we would be discussing today. We are going to be discussing body modification myths, and hopefully we're going to be debunking a few of them. I have linked below a couple of the articles and blogs that I used to source the kind of common misconceptions. You can go ahead and read those yourself if you are very interested. I would also like to state upfront that I am a junior tattoo artist. I am not a piercing artist, and if you need advice about piercings, that you need to go to a qualified piercer and get that advice. I have kind of jumbled up tattoos and piercings, and we have 10 talking points today. So I'm going to do them in no particular order, starting with different colored tattoo inks hurt more to be tattooed. Now I know this is going to upset some people. The first thing people are going to jump to is, but white ink hurts more. Unfortunately, there's no actual proof of this. What we do know is that white ink is generally applied at the end of a tattoo and generally applied to areas that have either been recently tattooed or very close to areas that have been recently tattooed. It's quite reasonable to think that it would be more painful to tattoo an area that you've just opened up and punched ink inside. Now, it must be said that certain colored inks do have a different viscosity, meaning they are thicker than black inks. This is because they have a higher pigment ratio to medium ratio. Some people claim that they can feel the difference in the different viscosities when it's tattooed. Again, this is anecdotal information. We don't have any proof of this, and there's certainly nothing to indicate that different colors should hurt more. Topic 2. Workplaces judge tattoos. Here's where we might run into a snag, because this might be true for the place that you work, and certainly there are workplaces that do not allow tattoos. However, in the studios that I've worked in, I've seen doctors, lawyers, real estate agents, life coaches come through and have beautiful, visible tattoos done. I think as a society, we're moving away from the idea that tattoos are for people who've been to prison or for people who are hard or tough. It is much more acceptable that different types of people have access to tattoos, and for this reason I think it's more acceptable to be tattooed. Your workplace might require that you cover your tattoos, but they don't restrict you from having them, and it certainly doesn't stop you from being able to be hired by companies. 3. Old piercings cannot get infected. This one is a little bit of a loophole, and I found it to be very interesting because it's actually happened to me. Once a piercing is fully healed, it shouldn't get infected, right? Because it's healed, it's closed. However, if you have an allergic reaction to your jewelry, for example, or if you have eczema or psoriasis in an area where you have a piercing, you may find that the piercing will reopen and the skin can get infected, which leads to the piercing becoming irritated and infected. So this is again kind of a loophole, but an old piercing can become infected. Something to keep in mind is whenever you are changing jewelry, make sure that you are sterilizing your hands, make sure that you are cleaning your jewelry, and just be as safe as possible. Never insert jewelry into an area where the piercing is cracked or the skin is broken or there appears to be inflammation or irritation. 4. Ice numbs the area that you want to be pierced. This one might get me into a little bit of hot water because I've actually seen a local tattoo studio in Johannesburg that offers piercings, and they use ice packs to numb the area where people want to be pierced. So I'm going to tell you why this is kind of a pseudo-scientific method. The reason that we use ice is because it restricts the blood vessels, right? So what this does is it doesn't allow blood to come to the surface of the skin, which creates a numbing effect when the skin doesn't have access to blood. It feels numb to the surface, however, the skin actually becomes tight and tense because it's not plumped by all of those blood vessels, right? And this can actually cause the piercing to be far more painful because the skin is tight. It can also cause the piercing to appear to change or to migrate once it's kind of plumped back up with blood, which can be very disappointing for a client. If a piercing studio offers you an ice pack, just politely say, no thank you, not for me. 5. Piercing guns are safe. I will once again reiterate, I am not a piercing artist. There are many incredible, talented, very well qualified piercing artists who will be happy to speak to you about this, and there are so many resources available online, on TikTok, on YouTube, on Instagram, of piercing artists who have already spoken on this issue. So I will just say two things. A piercing gun is not a single-use item, and it cannot be sterilized. It can be sanitized, it cannot be sterilized, and for this reason it is actually not safe. The second thing I will say is that when you are pierced with a gun, they are using the piercing jewelry to create the piercing. Generally, the piercing jewelry is blunt, so they are forcing a blunt object through the skin in order to create the piercing, which causes massive trauma, can lead to infection, and can lead to the piercing never healing right. 6. Rotating your jewelry helps it to heal. Straight out, absolutely not. Rotating your jewelry can actually damage the healed tissue that sits around the jewelry. Please do not rotate your piercings. 7. Barrier creams help to heal tattoos. I'm afraid to say that if your tattoo artist has suggested that you use Vaseline or Bepanthen to heal your tattoo, that they are giving you advice that has been outdated for about 7 to 10 years. Barrier creams are no longer considered to be the recommended method to heal tattoos. There are actually a few studies that have disproven that it is useful at all. There are some studies that suggest that it could potentially be helpful in conjunction with Dermafix Tegaderm Second Skin, but again, this is only when applied in a sterile environment, and so it's very iffy. 8. If a piercing is infected, just clean it more. This seems like really good advice. This seems really obvious, and I'm sure we've all seen the videos. It's particular with belly button piercings that people will fill up a shot glass of salt water, not even saline solution as they should be, with salt water, and they'll put the little shot glass against their belly button piercing and they'll hold it there for hours on end in the hopes that it will rid them of an infection. So the first thing I will say is, if you fear that you have an infection, that you do not go back to your piercer or your tattoo artist, that you go to a pharmacist or a doctor. Only a doctor can diagnose you with infection, and only a doctor can prescribe you with antibiotics which will support your body in fighting the infection. If you have used the saltwater method to heal an infection, it is not because you use the saltwater method, it is in fact despite the fact that you use the saltwater method. Saltwater or saline solution, soap, Dettol, whatever you might be using, only serves to aggravate the skin when it is exposed to the skin for too long or too frequently. So you're holding the saline solution or the salt water over this infected piercing, and all you're doing is potentially inflaming the skin even more, potentially stopping it from fighting the infection. 9. Tattoo machines use a single needle. There's a whole range of different types of needles, so I'll just address the 2 different kinds that are the most common. Normally, your lines will be completed with a liner. A liner is configured in a round shape. So if we have 5 needles, they will be configured in a round shape to a point, and those points will then be hitting the skin all at once. So it's 5 needles, it's 7 needles, it's 9 needles, it's 13 needles, etc. The more needles, the thicker or meatier the line will be. If you are being tattooed for shading, you'll be shaded with a magnum or a mag, and it's normally flat. They have offset needles, so they have needles, one set on top, one set on the bottom, that are offset like this, so like in the little gappies, that there are 2 sets of needles. So it's very rare that you see a tattoo completed with a single needle. Single needle tattoos are in fact very challenging and very specialized. And 10, tattoo inks cause cancer. This one used to kind of be true, which is really scary. About 30 to 50 years ago, there were some studies that linked specific pigments in red and blue inks to certain carcinogenic substances. Now, the pigments themselves were not proven to be carcinogenic. They were linked to substances that could potentially be carcinogenic. From the research that I've done, I cannot find any proof, any evidence that a tattoo has directly caused cancer ever. But what I can say is that that was 50 years ago. Now we use completely different pigments, we use completely different mediums, we have organic inks, we have vegan inks, and these are much safer than they have ever been. So no, tattoos do not cause cancer, and as far as I can tell, they never did. The tattoo industry as a whole can be a very closed safeguarded industry. It's very difficult for people, even in the industry like myself, to get information. And that is largely why I started this channel, to help open the conversation, to provide information for free, with honesty, with integrity. And so a lot of the things that I've said here may make some people very upset. You are absolutely within your rights to disagree with me. I would love to hear your opinions. I would love to hear the things that you have experienced, the things that you feel, and if you have resources that you would like to share with myself or anyone else, please link them down below. I would ask that we be respectful of each other when we disagree, but like I say, the industry has been very closed, and my attempt with a video like this is not to cause more division, but to educate as many people as I can. So I hope that you learned something, and that if you feel confused, that you feel comfortable to go to your tattoo artist or your piercing artist and discuss these topics with them. As I always say, have fun, good luck, and be safe. Goodbye for now.